be now in session. Honorable Judge McKenzie, Circuit Judge presiding. God save the state of Mississippi and his honorable court.
Thank you, maybe Steve. With the regular collection on this, the third day of November 2021, the Circuit Court of Lincoln County, Mississippi was convened in criminal action number 2019-129, State of Mississippi versus Flowers. I am Richard W. Dickey McKenzie, and I am sitting here today pursuant to, as a special judge, pursuant to an order of the Mississippi Supreme Court, as previously indicated earlier in this record. All the appropriate parties are present in the courtroom, as well as the defendant. All right, what says the state of Mississippi?
As Mississippi is ready to proceed, Your Honor, but I believe there is a motion to withdraw a plea, Your Honor.
All right, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right. Mr. President, if you come forward, please stand and raise your right hand and be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Yes, ma'am.
Having been sworn, let me make inquiry. They have indicated to the court that there is a motion pending in this matter, and that being the situation of amending the indictment of charges, which would no longer be facing the charge of capital murder, but instead 2 charges of first-degree murder, and also the charge of possession of a
Firearm by felony, Your Honor.
excuse me?
Firearm by conviction.
Yeah, okay, sure. Do you understand that, that was not being amended, that counts?
No, that is not being mentioned.
I need to specify that, and I want you to know that the amendment goes just to the 2, capital murder charges that then will be first degree murder. Has that motion been explained to you by your attorney?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that also your desire?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, 2, the charge of, the first charge of first degree murder, how do you plead? To the second count of first degree murder, how do you plead? To the count of possession of a firearm after the conviction of felony, how do you plead? All right, it's my understanding that you have executed this know your right pleading, but notwithstanding that, on this record in open court, I'm going to go over these even though you have already signed this, and I will expect you to answer in conformity with what you've done on this. Understand that? Okay. And you have the right to have an attorney to represent you at all stages of the proceedings. An attorney will be appointed for you if you cannot afford an attorney, and will be paid for by the county. You have the right to a trial by jury, the right to challenge the composition of the grand jury that indicted you, and the trial jury that would be selected to try your case. You have the right to compulsory process for your witnesses and the right to confront and cross-examine any witnesses who testifies against you. You have the right to not give any information that would incriminate you or furnish any evidence at all. You have the right to not testify as well as the right to testify, and the choice as to whether or not you do that and testify is in your case. The defendant does not have to prove anything. The burden of proof is entirely upon the state of Mississippi to be guilty by credible evidence beyond any reasonable doubt, and if the state fails to prove you guilty on a reasonable doubt, the jury would be under the duty and obligation to find you not guilty. All 12 jurors would have to agree on a verdict of guilt or not guilty. Even if you're found guilty by the verdict of the jury, you would still have a right to appeal to the Supreme Court of the state of Mississippi. I have read those rights, and you have to sign this, but just, once again, on this record, you understand each of those above rights as I have explained them to you.
Yes, Your Honor.
You understand that the guilty plea waives the above rights and places you in a position where you can be sentenced by the court up to the maximum penalty provided by law. You understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
If you have any questions about any of the plea proceedings, please ask your attorney or ask me as a judge. If your attorney has not answered your questions to your satisfaction, you may ask me such questions. Has anyone threatened, abused, or promised you anything to cause you to want to plead guilty?
No, Your Honor.
Has anyone made any representations to you or promises to you about MDO, Mississippi Department of Correction, classification procedures, or about the computation of your sentence to cause you to want to plead guilty?
No, Your Honor.
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty of the offenses for which you have been charged and for no other reason?
Yes, Your Honor.
Have you reviewed the state's discovery material with your attorney?
Yes, Your Honor.
Are you satisfied the state can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you are guilty of the crimes of which you are now pleading guilty?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, is your full name Marquis Flowers?
Yes, Your Honor.
Date of birth 12/4/1992?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your home telephone 60, I can't read, it looks like 601-320-8195, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Writing is kind of hard to read. And your address 426 East Independence in Brookhaven, Mississippi, 39601.
Yes, Your Honor.
Social Security number 42575-6467.
Yes, Your Honor.
Place of birth, Copiah County.
Yes, Your Honor.
You remember the African American race?
Yes, Your Honor.
The male,
Yes, Your Honor.
height of 5 feet 8 inches,
Yes, Your Honor.
185 pounds,
Yes, Your Honor.
and 28 years of age.
Yes, Your Honor.
You understand you have been charged with 3 different counts, and have you had explained to you both the minimum and maximum sentence that can be imposed upon you for pleading guilty by this court?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay? Knowing those things and knowing those parameters of that sentence, do you understand, both the maximum and minimum sentence?
Yes, Your Honor.
I believe you're a prior convicted felon.
Yes, Your Honor.
You understand as a prior convicted felon, you'll be receiving a sentence of time, particularly on the 3rd charge, and on the other 2 charges, the sentence is mandatory on the statute. But do you understand that in all 3 of these cases, you'll be receiving a sentence of time?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. At this time, what can the state prove in this case?
In this case, proceeded to trial, Your Honor, the state of Mississippi would prove that on the early morning hours of September the 29th, 2018, and it would be proven through video surveillance at a residence located there and also body cam, that the defendant was actually located in a vehicle, an SUV, where subjects came up and shot into the vehicle that was occupied by the defendant. The subjects fled the scene, a 911 call was placed to emergency services where 2 officers were sent in response to shots fired there on 6th Street. Your Honor, the video surveillance would actually show that the defendant ran to a residence, then ran to the shed. While this was happening, Officer James White and Officer Zach Moak of the Brookhaven Police Department responded to the call. Came to that location, saw blood that was on the ground, followed that blood trail, for lack of a better term, to the shed. The state of Mississippi would prove, if the court would allow under 4.4b, that the defendant had an outstanding warrant in Adams County for failure to appear, and again, it would be a motive, that's what the state of Mississippi would try to prove, that he shot the officer James White because of that warrant. And again, this is on body cam, he exited the shed, where he engaged in not an altercation, but Officer Moak took him in custody, had him on the ground. During that altercation, if lack of a better term, the defendant, while being videoed on body cam, turned and shot with a pistol, striking Officer Moak one time in the chest. Both the projectiles from Officer White and Officer Moak were sent to Mississippi Crime Lab. They were compared to the gun that's in the video and closely found by Brookhaven police when the defendant was taken in custody. Both of those rounds were fired by that gun, and we would have an expert witness to come and testify that to the ballistics. All these things happened in Lincoln County, Mississippi.
Mr. Flowers, your attorney, you have heard the proffer by the state of Mississippi. Do you understand all that the state says they intend to prove?
Yes, sir.
And is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. That being the case, is there any, victim impact?
Yeah, before we get to that, I'm sorry, understanding that, what was read, I also just like to reiterate on behalf of my client that, we read that, we know that there are elements that they have to prove, and just with all the surrounding circumstances and things that was, that they can prove, that I possibly can swear that it is accepting the plea, but it's also in part because we feel that it's in the best interest of them to do so.
So are you taking offer, please, young man?
I haven't changed my offer plea, I just want that to the record that he is accepting it, we just want to make that clear.
All right, so moved.
The state of Mississippi does have a recommendation, and after we make the recommendation, we do have victims. And the recommendation, and after I read that approach, is to life as count 1 and count 2, and 10 years to serve as count 3. Finding, of course, discretion, Your Honor, and all counts around the current. Yes.
And obviously, the first two is statutory.
Yes, sir. Mr. Janita Robinson, the victim assistance coordinator with the office, is going to introduce the victims, Your Honor.
Ms. Wise, you can take a seat, like she hears these individuals. Who you can offer?
Your Honor, we have 5 people that will speak on behalf of Officer White and Corporal Moak. We have Lisa White McBlair, the sister of James Kevin White, Lauren White and Darren White. They are the parents of Officer White. And we have the parents of Zach Moak, Corporal Moak, his father, Marshall Moak, and his mother, Vicky Moak, and his brother, Chris Moak.
In what order do you want?
The sister, Lisa Wolf.
Thank you. They have indicated in the record, but if you will, once again, if you'll give us your name, please, and speaking as loudly as possible.
My name is Lisa White McBlair, sister to Officer James Kevin White, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Kevin and I grew up in the middle of nowhere, away from town and school friends. We were only 19 months apart in age. We played together and fought together as kids and became friends as we got older. Kevin could always come up with some adventure for us, whether it be tearing a slide off a swing set to use as a bridge in the woods, swinging on his closet door until it came off the hinges, or finding a hole in my feather mattress and digging all the feathers out to play in. There was never a dull moment growing up with Kevin. Kevin loved his job, his 2 young sons, and his family. He was a jokester. He loved to pick on family and friends. We have laughed so hard we couldn't breathe on the phone over jokes aimed at each other on social media. Having my brother taken from me has affected every part of my life. I can't go anywhere alone anymore without looking over my shoulder, wondering what the people around me might do or be capable of. I have personally experienced the evil in this world now, and that is not something that you move on from. I feel I will always carry this fear with me. I have stress-induced panic attacks when I have to go out alone. I have nightmares. I don't sleep well. I have trouble concentrating at home and at work. I've become forgetful in the last 3 years, which my doctor says is a side effect of severe stress. My daughter recently told me that I checked out of reality 3 years ago. I could not interact normally with my children, my husband, my friends, or my coworkers for months. I came home from work and would lay on the couch all night. I cried myself to sleep for months. Spending time with my nephews hurt because all I could think about was what was taken from them at 7 and 8 years old. How will they grow up without their daddy? He won't be there when they graduate high school or college. He will not be standing beside them when they get married. He won't know his grandchildren, and they won't know him. I have missed work for court dates and counseling sessions to try and help me deal with my brother's senseless murder. Marquis Flowers handed every one of us a life sentence that morning over 3 years ago that we had no say in and no control over. He sentenced 7 and 8-year-old little boys to a life without their father. He sentenced my mother and my father to a life without their son. He sentenced me to a life without my baby brother, the one person I should have here to help me with our parents. Decisions in the future that should be made by both of us, I now have to face alone. To visit my brother, I have to go to the cemetery. I don't get to see him or talk with him anymore. All the memories I have now are all I will ever have. There will be no new ones made. The decision that Marquis Flowers made that morning affected more than just Officer White. It forever changed other lives too numerous to count. We are forced to live every single day with the choice Marquis Flowers made. If he had been given the opportunity, my brother would have helped Marquis Flowers that morning. He would have done this because that is who he was. He helped people, and he loved doing it. I plead with this court to impose the maximum sentence allowed by law to Marquis Flowers. I ask that his sentences run consecutively and that he not be granted the possibility of parole. He took my brother from me, and I ask that this court remove him from society for the rest of his life. I thank the court for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you.